The humans had been part of the Galactic Collective for only 3 standard cycles. In that short time, they had become the biggest joke in the known universe. Every species had heard the stories. Every bar, every trading post, every diplomatic hall buzzed with tales of the strange little creatures from the death world called Earth. Ambassador Zirith of the Volanti delegation found humans especially funny. She was attending a formal reception on Station Corvith 9, a massive space station that served as a trading hub for dozens of species. The station floated in neutral space, far from any homeworld, and millions of beings passed through its corridors every cycle. Zirith stood with her colleagues near the refreshment tables. She was tall and thin, like all Volanti. Her skin was almost see-through, and soft blue light pulsed beneath it with each heartbeat. The Volanti considered themselves the most cultured species in the galaxy. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. "Have you heard the latest about the humans?" Zirith asked her companions. Her voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "They fight each other for entertainment. They call it boxing or wrestling or some other barbaric name. They hit each other until one of them falls down." The other Volanti made sounds of disgust and amusement. "That is nothing," another diplomat said. "I heard they consume fermented poison for pleasure. It damages their organs, clouds their judgment, and sometimes kills them. And they do it willingly, often. They keep predators in their homes," Zirith added. "Creatures with sharp teeth and claws. They sleep next to these beasts. They call them pets and treat them like family members." The Volanti laughed their musical laugh. It carried across the reception hall, turning heads from various species. Some joined in the amusement. Others simply shook their heads at the mention of humans not far from the reception. In the station's entertainment district, Captain Danny Ortega sat at a bar. He was a man of medium height with dark hair and tired eyes. He had been a captain for 5 years now, commanding the Earth vessel Starbound Hope. His ship was docked at the station for resupply, and he had given his crew permission to enjoy some rest. The bar was called the Void's Edge. It was a popular spot for traders, soldiers, and travelers of all species. The lighting was dim, the music was strange, and the drinks came in colors that did not exist on Earth. Danny was nursing something purple that the bartender had promised would not kill him. He was not entirely sure he believed the bartender. His first officer, Chloe Watts, sat on the stool beside him. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Right now, those eyes were fixed on a group of Volanti across the room. "They are staring again," she said. Her voice was low and tight. Danny glanced over. The Volanti were indeed staring. They pointed at the human crew scattered throughout the bar. They whispered to each other and laughed. One of them made a gesture that probably meant something insulting in their culture. "Let them stare," Danny said. He took a sip of his drink and made a face. It tasted like someone had mixed fruit juice with engine coolant. "We are here to resupply, not to make friends. It would be nice to go somewhere without being treated like circus animals." Chloe muttered. Danny understood her frustration. Every station was the same. Every planet they visited, every species they met, the reaction was always similar. Curiosity at first, then amusement, then open mockery. Humans were the newcomers. Humans were the strange ones. Humans were the crazy creatures from a planet that seemed designed to kill them. On the other side of the bar, Private First Class Marco Reyes was trying very hard to keep his temper under control. He was young, barely 22 years old. This was his first deep space assignment, and he had been excited to meet alien species. That excitement had faded quickly. A Volanti had approached him. The alien was at least 7 feet tall and looked down at Marco like he was examining an interesting insect. "Is it true?" the Volanti asked in perfect universal standard. That humans regularly throw themselves out of flying vehicles? For fun? Marco's jaw tightened. It is called skydiving. And yes, we do. The Volante's large eyes went wide with theatrical horror. You jump from aircraft while they are still in the sky? On purpose? We wear parachutes. They slow our fall, but why would you do such a thing? Because it is exciting. Because it feels like flying. Because we can. The Volante stared at him for a long moment. Then it turned to its companions and said something in its own language. They all burst into laughter. Truly, the Volante said, turning back to Marco, your species is completely insane. Marco wanted to say something sharp in response. He wanted to explain that humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars. He wanted to point out that Earth was a planet where almost everything could kill you, and humans had not just survived but thrived. He wanted to tell this arrogant alien that being called crazy by someone who had never faced real danger meant nothing, but he held his tongue. He was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. Captain Ortega had made it clear that they were to avoid trouble. So Marco simply smiled a tight smile and turned back to his drink. Near the entrance of the bar, a group of Dravens sat at a large table. They were massive beings, each one standing over 8 feet tall. Their skin looked like gray stone, rough and thick. Their eyes were small and dark, set deep in heavy skulls. The Draven were known throughout the galaxy as warriors. Their culture valued strength, honor, and courage above all else. The largest of them was named Corvith. He had been watching the humans since they entered the bar. He had seen the mockery. He had seen how the Volante pointed and laughed. He had seen how the young human soldier had swallowed his anger and stayed silent. Corvith had heard many stories about humans. Some were amusing. Some were hard to believe. But one story had caught his attention. He had heard that humans, when they saw strangers in danger, would run toward the threat instead of away from it. They would risk their own lives for people they had never met. This was something the Draven understood. He watched the human captain at the bar. The man looked tired and worn, like he carried heavy burdens. But there was steel in his eyes. There was something underneath the surface that the Volante and others did not see. Corvith had learned long ago not to judge warriors by their size. Some of the most dangerous fighters he had ever faced had been small. It was not the body that made a warrior. It was the spirit inside. He lifted his drink, a thick black liquid that would kill most species, and watched the humans with growing interest. Something told him that this night was going to be memorable. The trouble started the way trouble often does. There was too much drinking and too little thinking. The bar was getting crowded as the station's night cycle began. More species filed in, looking for entertainment and escape from their daily work. A Keth trader named Slith had been watching the humans for most of the evening. The Keth were reptilian creatures, covered in dark green scales that gleamed under the bar's dim lights. They had long snouts filled with sharp teeth, and their eyes were yellow with black slits for pupils. The Keth were known throughout the galaxy as merchants and traders. They were also known for their terrible tempers. Slith had a personal reason to hate humans. The previous cycle, he had lost a very profitable shipping contract. A human company had offered better prices and faster delivery times. Slith had lost millions of credits because of those humans. He blamed the entire species for his misfortune. He sat with 3 other Keth traders at a corner table. They had been drinking something that smelled like rotting fruit, and their voices had grown louder with each round. "Look at them," Slith hissed, gesturing toward the humans with his drink. Weak little mammals. They should have stayed on their dirt planet, playing with fire and sharp sticks. His companions laughed. It was a harsh sound, like rocks scraping together. "I heard they need to sleep for 8 hours every rotation," one of the other Keth said. 8 hours. What kind of species wastes so much time unconscious? A weak species, Slith replied. A species that does not belong among the stars. He said this loudly, loud enough for the nearby humans to hear. He wanted them to hear. He wanted to see how they would react. Engineer Beth Lawson was sitting close enough to catch every word. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with short red hair and hands that were permanently stained with engine grease. She had worked on starships for 15 years, and she had heard every insult and joke about humans that existed. Usually, she let it go. Usually, she reminded herself that words were just words, and getting angry would only prove the aliens right about humans being primitive. But tonight, something snapped. Maybe it was the long journey. Maybe it was the months of being mocked and dismissed. Maybe it was the look on Marco's face earlier when that Volante had laughed at him. Whatever the reason, Beth turned slowly on her bar stool and fixed Slith with a cold stare. "You want to say that a little louder, Scales?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but there was danger underneath it. "I do not think the whole station heard you." The bar grew quieter around them. Other patrons sensed that something was about to happen. Some moved away from the potential conflict. Others leaned in, curious to see how this would play out. Slith's eyes narrowed. He had not expected the small human to respond. He set down his drink and rose from his seat. Standing, he towered over Beth by at least 2 feet. His clawed hands flexed at his sides. "I said," he hissed, stepping closer to her, "that your kind does not belong here. You are an accident of evolution. Prey animals who somehow stumbled into the stars. Beth." Danny's voice came from across the room. It was a warning, but Beth was already standing. She had to crane her neck to look up at the Keth's face, but she did not back away. She did not even blink. "Funny thing about prey animals," she said quietly. "We learn to bite back." Slith's reaction was instant. His arm swept down in a powerful blow, aimed at the small human's head. He meant to knock her across the room, to show everyone what happened when prey forgot its place. He missed. Beth had been waiting for the attack. She had seen his muscles tense, seen his weight shift. She ducked under his arm so fast that he hit nothing but air. In the same motion, she brought her fist up hard. It connected with the soft tissue beneath the Keth's jaw, right where his scales were thinnest. The crack of the impact echoed through the suddenly silent bar. Slith's head snapped back. He stumbled, shocked by the pain. A human had hit him. A small, soft, weak human had actually hurt him. For a moment, nobody moved. The entire bar seemed frozen in that instant. Then Slith roared in fury, and everything exploded into chaos. The other Keth traders surged forward, knocking over their table in their rush to reach Beth. From across the bar, the human crew responded. Danny was already moving, pushing through the crowd. Chloe was right behind him. Marco knocked over his own drink as he jumped to his feet. Tables flipped. Glasses shattered. The bartender, a many-tentacled creature called an Urian, dove behind the counter with a sound that might have been a sigh. This was not the first bar fight he had seen, and it would not be the last. Beth found herself facing 2 Keth at once. They were bigger, stronger, and had claws that could tear through metal. But they were also drunk and angry, which made them slow and sloppy. She moved between them like water, ducking their wild swings and landing quick, sharp blows wherever she could. Danny reached her side just as a 3rd Keth joined the fight. The captain caught a clawed hand that was reaching for Beth's throat and twisted it hard. The Keth screamed and fell to his knees. "I told you to stay out of trouble," Danny said to Beth. "He started it," she replied, kicking a Keth in the knee and sending him stumbling. "That is not going to look great in my report." "Then do not write a report." Chloe arrived with a bar stool in her hands. She swung it into a Keth's midsection, folding him in half. Marco was right behind her, his military training showing in every precise movement. The fight spread. Other patrons got caught up in it, either by accident or by choice. A species called the Morvik, small furry creatures known for their nasty bites, decided they did not like the Keth and joined the human side. A pair of traitors from a world Danny did not recognize tried to use the chaos to steal from the bar and got tackled by the bartender's tentacles. Through it all, the Volanti watched from the edges of the room. Their musical voices chirped with shock and disgust. This was exactly what they expected from humans. Violence, chaos, barbarism. They would have wonderful stories to tell at their next reception. But the Draven were watching. 2. Corvith had not moved from his table. His dark eyes followed the fight with intense focus. He watched the small human engineer stand her ground against opponents twice her size. He watched the human captain protect his crew without hesitation. He watched how they moved together, covering each other, fighting as one unit. These were not the actions of weak prey animals. These were the actions of warriors. Corvith's companions shifted restlessly. They could feel the battle energy in the air. Draven blood ran hot in times like these. Should we stop it? One of them asked. Corvith did not answer. He was watching Beth. Blood was running from a cut above her eye, dripping down her face. A Keth had slashed her with his claws. It must have hurt badly. She was smiling. Corvith felt something stir in his chest. It was respect. The bar had become a battlefield. Broken glass covered the floor like glittering snow. Tables lay on their sides, turned into barriers and weapons. The air was thick with shouts, grunts, and the crash of bodies hitting the ground. Danny found himself back to back with Chloe. 3. Keth traders had surrounded them, moving in a slow circle like predators around wounded prey. Their yellow eyes gleamed with hatred. Their claws clicked together as they prepared to attack. Just once, Danny muttered, keeping his eyes on the closest Keth. I would like a shore leave that does not end in violence. Where's the fun in that? Chloe replied. She held a broken bottle in her hand, its jagged edge catching the light. The Keth attacked together. Danny caught the first one with a punch to the throat that left it gasping. Chloe ducked under the second one's claws and drove her elbow into its ribs. The third one grabbed Danny from behind, wrapping its arms around his chest. Danny threw his head back hard. The back of his skull connected with the Keth's snout. There was a wet crunch and the grip loosened. Danny twisted free and kicked the Keth's legs out from under it. Across the room, Marco was fighting a Keth that was at least twice his weight. The young soldier was using every trick he had learned in training. He stayed close to his opponent, too close for the Keth to use its greater reach. He moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be grabbed. The Keth swung a massive fist at his head. Marco dropped low, letting the blow pass over him, and struck the Keth's knee with all his strength. The joint bent the wrong way. The Keth toppled with a howl of pain. Beth had found a chair leg somewhere in the chaos. She wielded it like a club, spinning and striking with a speed that seemed impossible for someone her size. 2 Keth were already down because of her. A third was approaching, more carefully than the others. You will pay for this, human, the Keth hissed. Your species will pay. Beth smiled, blood still running down her face. You talk too much. She threw the chair leg at his face. He raised his arms to block it, and she was already moving. She hit him low, driving her shoulder into his midsection. The impact knocked him off balance. He stumbled backward, and she followed with a knee to his groin. The Keth made a high-pitched sound and collapsed. They always fall for that, Beth said to nobody in particular. The Volanti had long since fled the bar. They had no stomach for violence, no desire to see blood and broken bones. They would tell stories about this night for years, always emphasizing how barbaric and primitive the humans were. But the Draven had not moved. They sat at their table like stone statues, watching the battle unfold. Their dark eyes missed nothing. They saw every blow, every dodge, every moment of courage and skill. Corvus had made his decision several minutes ago, but he was waiting for the right moment. A true warrior knew that timing was everything. The moment came when more Keth arrived. They poured in from the back room of the bar. There must have been a dozen of them, maybe more. They were the crew of a Keth trading vessel, and they had heard that their fellow traders were in trouble. They came ready for blood. The humans saw them coming. Danny's heart sank. His crew was already tired and hurt. They had been holding their own against 4 Keth. But 12 was a different story entirely. "Well," Beth said, spitting blood onto the floor, "it has been nice knowing you all." Marco moved to stand beside her. His face was bruised, and he was favoring his left arm, but his eyes were steady. "At least we go down fighting." Chloe laughed. It was a strange sound in the middle of the chaos, but somehow it felt right. That is the human way. The leader of the new Keth group stepped forward. He was bigger than the others, with scars crossing his snout and a look in his eyes that said he had killed before. His name was Vreth, and he was known in certain circles as someone you did not want to cross. "Now you die, mammals," Vreth said. His voice was like gravel being crushed. Slowly and painfully, the Keth began to move forward. The humans braced themselves for the end. The Draven moved so fast that nobody saw them coming. Corvus crossed the distance in 3 massive strides. His fist connected with Vreth's skull, and the sound was like a boulder cracking. The Keth leader flew backward, crashing into his own crew and knocking several of them down. The other Draven hit the Keth line like an avalanche. They were bigger than the Keth, stronger than the Keth, and their stone-like skin shrugged off blows that would have broken human bones. They fought with a terrible efficiency, each movement designed to cause maximum damage. Danny stood frozen for a moment, unable to understand what was happening. 1 second, they had been facing certain death. The next, massive stone warriors were fighting at their side. Corvus turned to look at him. The Draven's face split into something that might have been a smile, though on that rocky face it was hard to tell. "You fight well, human," Corvus said. His voice was deep, like thunder in the distance. "Stupid, but well. The Draven respect this. You are helping us?" Danny asked. "Yes. Why?" Corvus did not answer with words. He simply turned and punched another Keth so hard that the trader crashed through a table and did not get up. One of the younger Draven, still new to the warrior's path, looked confused as he fought beside Marco. "We are helping them?" he asked his leader. "The small ones?" "Yes," Corvus replied, catching a Keth by the throat and lifting it off the ground. "Today, we are helping them." He threw the Keth into 2 others, knocking them all down. The tide of the battle had turned. The humans and Draven fought together, and somehow it worked. Where the humans were fast and unpredictable, the Draven were solid and unstoppable. The humans darted around their new allies, striking at Keth, who were focused on the larger threats. The Draven protected the humans from blows that would have killed them. Beth found herself fighting alongside a Draven female named Thrix. The stone woman was only slightly shorter than the males, and just as deadly. She watched Beth take down a Keth with a flying knee to the face and made a sound that might have been approval. "You are very small," Thrix said. Beth landed beside her, breathing hard. "I get that a lot. It is not a criticism." Thrix grabbed a Keth and threw it through the bar's window. Glass exploded outward. Small things can be very dangerous, like the crystal vipers on my homeworld. They are the size of your finger, but their venom can kill a Draven in 3 heartbeats. "Thanks," Beth said, ducking a Keth's claws and striking its throat. "I think It is a compliment, Thrix assured her. We respect the Crystal Vipers. Now we respect you also. The remaining Keth were starting to realize they had made a terrible mistake. They had expected to crush the small humans easily. They had not expected the Draven to get involved. One by one, they began to retreat, dragging their wounded companions with them. Reth, the Keth leader, was back on his feet, though he looked unsteady. The blow from Corvith had cracked his skull. Blood ran from his snout. This is not over, he spat at the humans and Draven. The Keth do not forget. Neither do the Draven, Corvith replied calmly. Remember that, reptile. Vreth held the massive warrior's gaze for a moment. Then he turned and fled with what remained of his crew. The bar fell silent. The battle was over. The bar looked like a disaster zone. Tables were broken or overturned. Chairs had been smashed into pieces. The floor was covered with glass, blood, and spilled drinks. The window that Thrix had thrown a Keth through was now just a jagged hole in the wall. The bartender, the many-tentacled Urian, slowly rose from behind his counter. He looked at the destruction with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too many fights in his establishment. His tentacles waved in a gesture that probably meant frustration in his culture. This is coming out of someone's account, he said flatly. Danny winced. He would have to deal with that later. Right now, he was more concerned about his crew. Chloe was sitting on an overturned table, examining her leg. She had twisted it during the fight, and it was already starting to swell. Marco was holding his left arm against his chest. One of the Keth had gotten a good hit on him, and the arm might be broken. Beth stood in the middle of the wreckage, blood still dripping from the cut above her eye, looking like she was ready for another round. Everyone alive? Danny asked. His crew checked in. Bruises, cuts, a possible broken bone, but nothing life-threatening. They had been lucky. Without the Draven, they would all be dead. Corvith approached Danny. Up close, the Draven was even more impressive. His stone-like skin was rough and gray, marked with old scars from ancient battles. His eyes were small but incredibly intense, like looking into deep wells. Your crew fought with honor, Corvith said. They did not run. They did not beg. This is worthy of respect. Danny nodded slowly. Thank you for helping us. We would not have survived without you. Perhaps. Perhaps not. Corvith glanced at Beth, who was helping Marco sit down. Your small one is fierce. She might have found a way. Beth? She is something else. She is a warrior born in the wrong body. Her spirit is bigger than her form. Corvith made a sound that Danny realized was a chuckle. Among my people, she would be celebrated in songs. Beth looked up at that moment and caught them watching her. She raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing, Danny said quickly. Just discussing how much trouble you have caused. I did not start it. You threw the first punch. He swung first. I just made sure I landed first. Beth grinned, then winced as the movement pulled at her wound. There is a difference. Thrix approached Beth with something in her massive hand. It was a small container, holding a thick blue paste. For your injury, the Draven female said. It will stop the bleeding and help it heal. Beth looked at the paste with suspicion. Is it safe for humans? I do not know. But it is that, or you keep bleeding. Beth considered this for a moment, then shrugged and took the container. Good point. She smeared some of the paste on her wound. It tingled, then went numb. The bleeding slowed almost immediately. Thank you, Beth said. Thrix nodded. You earned it. Around them, other species were slowly returning to the bar. The fight was over, and there was gossip to collect. Word of what had happened would spread quickly through the station. By the next cycle, everyone would know that the crazy humans had gotten into a brawl with the Keth, and that the Draven had taken the human side. This was big news. The Draven did not involve themselves in the affairs of other species. They kept to themselves, traded when necessary, and avoided entanglements. For them to openly fight alongside humans meant something. The galaxy would be talking about this for a long time. Corvus seemed to be thinking about this too. He looked around at the other species watching them, then back at Danny. "Walk with me, Captain," he said. "We should speak privately." Danny glanced at his crew. Chloe nodded slightly. She would take care of things here. He followed Corvus out of the ruined bar and into the corridor outside. The station's night cycle was in full effect. The lights were dimmed, and fewer beings were moving through the halls. Danny and Corvus walked in silence for a few moments, the human having to take 2 steps for every one of the Draven strides. "You are wondering why we helped," Corvus said finally. "The thought had crossed my mind. I have been watching your species since you first appeared in our region of space. You are strange beings. You are small and weak compared to most species. Your bodies are fragile. You need constant food, water, and sleep. By all logic, you should have died out long ago." Danny said nothing. He had heard versions of this speech before. "But you did not die out," Corvus continued. "You survived. Your homeworld is what we call a death world. The gravity is strong. The atmosphere is violent. You have predators and poisons and diseases that would destroy other species. And yet you thrived." "We are stubborn," Danny said. "Yes, this is what I wanted to discuss." Corvus stopped walking and turned to face Danny directly. "The Draven have a concept. We call it Kethver. In your language, it would be something like the fire within. It is the thing that makes a warrior keep fighting when all hope is lost. It is the spirit that refuses to surrender." Danny met the Draven's gaze. "And you think humans have this?" "I know you do. I saw it tonight. Your engineer, with blood in her eyes, smiling at enemies who could have killed her with one blow. Your young soldier, wounded and outmatched, standing his ground anyway. You, Captain, fighting to protect your people without a moment's hesitation." Corvus placed a heavy hand on Danny's shoulder. The weight was enormous, but Danny did not flinch. "The galaxy mocks your people. They call you mad, reckless, barely civilized. I have noticed. They are fools." The words came out like stones dropping. "They see only the surface. They see small bodies and strange customs. They do not see what lies beneath. And what is that?" Corvus' rocky face shifted into that almost smile again. "Survivors. Fighters. Beings who do not know how to give up. Your people do not fight because you lack fear. You fight despite the fear. You feel it, and you keep going anyway. This is true courage. This is Kethver." Danny felt something warm spread through his chest. He had spent years dealing with the mockery and dismissal. He had learned to ignore it, to tell his crew to ignore it. But hearing these words from a Draven warrior, from a species that valued strength and honor above all else, meant more than he could express. "Among the Draven," Corvus continued, "warriors who fight well together form bonds. We call these bonds Tokath. It means something like brotherhood of battle. These bonds are sacred. They cannot be broken." Danny understood what Corvus was offering. It was not just friendship. It was not just an alliance. It was something deeper, something that went beyond politics and treaties. "What does this mean, exactly?" Danny asked. "It means that when humans need allies, the Draven will answer. It means that your enemies are our enemies. It means that we stand together, today and in the days to come." Corvus extended his massive hand. Danny looked at it, then up at the Draven's face. He saw sincerity there and respect, and something that looked almost like hope. Danny took the hand and shook it. Corvus's grip was strong enough to crush stone, but he was careful with the human. Then we are Torkath, Danny said. Brothers of battle. Yes, Corvith replied. Forever. Station security arrived 20 minutes after the fight ended. They came in force, a dozen officers from various species, armed with stun weapons and wearing armor. The security chief was an elderly Orion named Morax, with more tentacles than patience and a look in his eyes that said he had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. Morax surveyed the ruined bar with the expression of someone calculating repair costs. The broken furniture, the shattered window, the blood stains on the floor, the unconscious Keth traders who had not been fast enough to flee with their companions. Another night on Corvith 9, he muttered. He turned to face the group that was clearly responsible for the destruction. The humans stood together, bruised and bloody but unbowed. The Draven stood with them, forming a united front that made Morax's tentacles twitch with unease. Danny expected the worst. He expected to be arrested, detained, and possibly charged with starting an interstellar incident. Human-galactic relations were fragile enough without bar brawls making things worse. But Morax surprised him. The Keth started it? The security chief asked. It sounded more like a statement than a question. They did, Corvith confirmed before Danny could respond. The Draven's voice was calm and certain. The humans defended themselves with honor. The Draven chose to stand with them. Morax's many eyes shifted between the humans and the Draven. He seemed to be calculating something in his head. Finally, his tentacles waved in a gesture of dismissal. The Keth have been causing trouble on this station for many cycles. Consider this a warning to them. He turned to Danny. Your people can go, Captain. Try to stay out of trouble for the rest of your time here. Danny was too surprised to respond immediately. He had prepared himself for the worst, and instead he was being let go. Thank you, he managed. Do not thank me. Thank your large friends. Morax looked at the unconscious Keth on the floor. Someone clean this up. And wake these reptiles so I can lecture them about starting fights with species who actually know how to finish them. As the humans limped back toward the docking area where the Starbound Hope was waiting, Corvith fell into step beside Danny. The Draven's heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor like distant drums. You are surprised the security chief let you go, Corvith observed. A little, Danny admitted. The Keth are not popular on this station. They cheat in their trades, they start fights, and they treat other species like dirt beneath their claws. The Orion was probably happy to see them beaten. And having the Draven speak for us helped, I imagine. Corvith made that rumbling sound that was his version of a laugh. The Draven have a certain reputation. When we say something is true, others tend to believe us. They reached the docking area. The Starbound Hope waited in its berth, a mid-sized human vessel that looked small compared to the other ships around it. But Danny loved that ship. It had carried his crew through countless journeys, countless dangers. It was home. Before Danny could board, Corvith stopped him with a gentle touch on the shoulder. When we spoke earlier, I told you about Torkath, the Brotherhood of Battle. I meant what I said. The Draven do not make such bonds lightly. Danny turned to face the massive warrior. I understand. Neither do humans. Good. Corvith reached into a pouch at his waist and pulled out a small stone. It was dark gray, shot through with veins of silver that seemed to glow faintly in the corridor's light. Take this. It is a Corvin stone. All Draven carry them. If you ever need us, hold this stone and speak your need. It will find its way to us. Danny took the stone. It was heavier than it looked and warm against his palm. How does it work? I do not know. Some things are beyond explanation. Just know that it does work, and the Draven will answer when you call. Danny slipped the stone into his pocket, feeling its weight against his leg. Thank you, Corvith, for everything. No thanks are needed between Tokath. Only loyalty. Corvus stepped back. Safe travels, Captain Danny Ortega. May your enemies always underestimate you. And may yours always regret it, Danny replied. He was not sure if that was an appropriate response, but Corveth's smile suggested he appreciated the sentiment. Danny boarded the Starbound. Hope his crew was already inside, getting their injuries treated in the medical bay. Chloe's leg was wrapped tightly, elevated on a bench. Marco's arm was in a temporary cast. Beth was sitting on a table, letting the ship's medical officer examine the cut on her face. How bad? Danny asked. Nothing that won't heal, the medical officer replied. She was a woman named Paula Vance, calm and practical in the face of any emergency. They're lucky. A few more minutes in that fight, and we'd be looking at something much worse. Luck had nothing to do with it, Beth said. We're just that good. You're just that reckless, Chloe corrected. But she was smiling slightly. Danny looked at his crew, his family, his people. They had walked into that bar as the joke of the galaxy. They were walking out as something different. Word of the fight would spread. Word of the Draven alliance would spread even faster, that it would not change everything overnight. The Volanti would still mock them. Other species would still dismiss them. Humans would still be seen as strange, crazy, and out of place among the stars. But now there was a crack in that narrative. Now there was a story that told a different truth. The humans who had stood against impossible odds. The Draven who had found them worthy of respect. The alliance formed in blood and battle. Captain? Chloe was watching him with curious eyes. Everything okay? Everything is fine, Danny said. Better than fine. Let's get off this station and head home. We have a story to tell. The Starbound Hope pulled away from Station Corvus 9 and set course for Earth. Behind them, the story was already spreading. In bars across the station, beings of every species were talking about the crazy humans who had gotten into a brawl with the Keth and somehow ended up allied with the Draven. Some laughed at the story. Some shook their heads in disbelief. But some listened carefully with new interest in these small, strange beings from the Death World. The Volanti would still whisper at their receptions. They would still point and laugh and call humans insane. But now, when they made their jokes, they would check over their shoulders first. They would remember that those crazy humans had done something no other species had done in living memory. They had earned the respect of the Draven, and in bars across the galaxy, when humans walked in, the other patrons began to make room done, just in case, because you never knew what might happen when humans were around. You never knew when a small engineer might throw a punch that started a battle. You never knew when those weak, primitive, Death World survivors might surprise you. That was the thing about humans. The galaxy was learning. They always surprised you. On the Starbound Hope, heading home through the stars. Beth Lawson sat in her quarters and looked at her reflection in the small mirror on her wall. The cut above her eye was already healing, thanks to the Draven medicine. It would leave a scar, probably. A reminder of the night everything changed. She smiled at her reflection. Not bad, she said to herself, for a prey animal. In the captain's quarters, Danny Ortega held the Corvin stone in his hand. It was still warm, still glowing faintly with that strange silver light. He did not know what the future held. He did not know what challenges awaited humanity among the stars, but he knew one thing for certain. They would face those challenges together. Humans and Draven, Torkath, brothers and sisters of battle. And anyone who underestimated them would learn the same lesson. The Keth had learned tonight. Humanity was here to stay, and they were just getting started.